I'm Dr. Rik Watch, and I'm here with a couple of guests you're going to love. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Rik.
Gary Christopher from Ezra. Welcome to the interview. I'm Dr. Rik Watch with a dear friend of the studio and, of course, Ezra International, Gary Christopher.
Hey, Rik. Always good to be with you.
It's always good to be with you, too.
Yeah.
What are we talking about today?
Well, Rik, we're at the very close to the time of Holocaust Remembrance Day.
Okay.
And, you are the king of the interview here, but I want to turn the tables. I want to turn the tables on you, and because I know that you've spent a lot of time with Holocaust survivors. And I would love, and I hope our audience would love to hear some of the stories, some of your experiences. What did they share with you that's left a lasting impression?
All right, maybe I'll start with my own ignorance. As a pastor, I'd been teaching pulpit ministry and leading congregations for many years. And then I went to do a study on, it was something like, the hidden secrets of God or the codes of God or something. But it led me to a discussion by a rabbi during the Holocaust, Rabbi Michael ben Weismandel, and a brilliant scholar of Torah.
Okay.
And it just happened to fit into what I was studying at the time. I had no desire or no even interest in looking at the Holocaust as a pastor. And when I began to read his story and his passion for the 5 books of Moses, Torah, that I began to see that there was a big gap in my training. And that gap was understanding the Jewish people. I had always looked at Judaism as being just a separate religion, like Mormonism or Hinduism or something else. I did not see that it was connected, or that we were actually connected to the Jewish people. Is that
you are not alone in that, because I hear that all the time. What is all this Jew stuff? I hear that quote and it just sends shivers down my spine, because there's such a lack of understanding of our grafted in process. And Paul says we're grafted in. He also says we're part of the Commonwealth of Israel, Ephesians 2:12. So yeah, that you're hitting on an important topic for another day. But I appreciate your honesty and knowing that it's where you came from. We all did. We all came from a place in Christianity where we did not realize that intimate connection that we have with the Jewish people when it comes to being the people of God.
Yes, exactly. So that led me naturally to go to a local synagogue and ask if I could speak to survivors of the Holocaust, HaShoah. And so in that process, I'll cut it down to a short story, I began to meet some Holocaust survivors, many, but 2 that specifically, we became like family together. And we were always either on the phone or having lunch or breakfast or dinner together for years. And it changed me. It changed my life. It changed the way I perceive and understand and apply the Bible. And that's not just the Torah, not just the Tanakh, the Old Testament, but also the Brit HaShoah', the New Testament.
Right.
Totally changed my understanding. And to this day, it's still changing it. So, I think there's I want to say this as a cautionary tale before I go into discussing these relationships and some of the stories.
Sure.
And that is, I think that we can take the information that we're now grafted in and apply whatever new labels we want to, change whatever words, pronunciation that we want to. But it doesn't change the fact, as Gentiles coming into this, that we probably don't have generations of heritage behind us that have been persecuted for their faith, having been Jews.
That's right. We cannot understand and cannot relate and understand the fact that Christianity means horrific events to a Jewish person. It means Inquisition. It means Holocaust, or going back to the Crusades. All that horrible history that Christianity perpetrated on Jewish people, persecution, death, and destruction. that's in the mindset, the zeitgeist of a Jewish person when it comes to Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
And so I again appreciate that, because so many Christians approach Jewish people in ignorance, thinking that, okay, all I got to do is share a few quick, smart, clever phrases, words, convert them to Christianity, and everything is going to be great, not knowing all of what Christianity has meant in the past for a Jewish person.
Absolutely. And I would say also there's a couple words we could add to your definition and description. It wouldn't just be ignorance, but it could also, and most likely, is arrogance and pride.
Yeah.
And so the idea that now we have received the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit of God, that because we have, apparently now we have this new paradigm that they didn't, or they don't, or they won't, without accepting a Messiah. And so I think that throws out all the promises to the Jewish people that were made throughout Scripture. And that is, God would never leave them or forsake them.
That's right.
Fear not, neither be dismayed. That kind of idea in Joshua and in Moses' writings. So that, and it would be a perpetuity throughout until heaven and earth passes away. Well, as far as I can tell, terra firma is still happening. Yeah, we're still on it. Yeah. We're on something. So, and I think you have to be on something not to recognize that.
That's well, God promised. He says, "Look, as long as the moon and the stars are still in the heavens, and the heavens can't be measured out, that my promises to Israel will stand firm." And yes, I saw the moon last night. The sun's out today. I mean, as far as we can see, God's promises are still in existence.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So going in and speaking to Jewish people and allowing them to actually teach you something is a new concept that I think all of us as believers in Messiah need to get into our heads. That if your purpose in meeting a Jewish people is so you can convert them, you've got it all wrong. Your purpose in meeting a Jewish people is that this is the apple of God's eye, and there's a lot of things you're going to begin to learn through a Jewish person who studies Torah. And it's going to change your paradigm, and you'll enjoy it. So in this process of getting to know a synagogue with Holocaust survivors, it began to change my life hearing the stories. And the stories, now 70 years removed from the initial event, were just as clear, just as keen, just as precise as probably the day that they had seen these events take place.
It's etched completely in their memory.
And completely, for the Holocaust survivors that I spent the most time with, I would get phone calls and we would have conversations. So Avraham was one of those. I'll leave out the last name, but Avraham was one. And we would talk, and he'd say, "Pastor Rik," thick Polish. "Pastor Rik, I had another nightmare last night." And I would say, "Avram, or Abraham, I'm going to come over and we'll talk." We'll go out to breakfast. And I'd let him just speak.
Yeah.
It didn't matter how many times he had told me these stories. What was important was it was cathartic for him.
Right.
And it was healing, and it was helpful. And it helped me. It changed me. So one of the stories that I'll tell is of a man named Lou and a man named Abraham. And they had not met before officially, and so I brought them into a Jewish deli. Here I am, a Gentile pastor. I bring them both together into a Jewish deli in San Diego, and we began to talk. And as we were talking about things, something came up from the table. First off, that they had so much in common. They'd both been in Auschwitz, and Abraham had been in, I think, a total of 5 camps and 3 death marches. And he went in when he was a young man, barely a teenager. And he was bayoneted in the leg, and so a lot of blood. The older Jews in the camp knew that he would be killed instantly. Being so young and already having a wound, they'd just take care of him. But they bandaged him up with old shirts and things to keep the blood from flowing. And he was part of the Werner von Braun. Yeah, Braun.
Yeah.
The missile, assembling these missiles and doing the thing underground. And so he was a part of that, and they would keep him hidden whenever people came around that would notice that he had bled through part of his clothing. We made it through all these camps, and when he and Lou were sitting at the table, they were talking, and then one of the two brought up, when I was in Auschwitz, I saw a young boy, who was strung up with his hands behind his back and ropes tying him up. And you can imagine the immense amount of pain that would be. And that he was begging the Jewish men in that camp to kill him, put him to death. He was in so much pain. And as, I think it was Lou that told the story, or it could have been Abraham, I forget. And as one told the story, the other, you could see a light come on in his eyes. He said, I was there, I saw it. They were across this courtyard from one another, watching this young man be brutally tormented and then eventually killed. And they both began to weep. And so I heard these stories over and over again. I'll give you another one just to let you know how tremendously awful this was. And we get some of these stories that are just hard enough to hear and see when they're put into movie format. But a lot of it is still too gruesome for them to depict in a movie. But one of those was, and if you have a small child watching this interview, you might want to divert their attention for a few minutes. But one of those was, Abraham told me the story that on many occasions they would watch this pit that had been lit on fire, the burning of bodies, I'm sure. And that they would back up dump trucks filled with infants and geriatrics, grandmas and grandpas, and they would just tilt the truck bed in and let them all be burned alive, and that happened over and over and over again. So this concept of Holocaust, anti-Semitism, is not just something that took place in the past 70 plus years ago, but it's something you and I can easily talk about today because it's still going on.
Yeah, and that it amazes me and saddens me to no end, because we thought, you would think the world had learned something from the Holocaust. It hasn't. And then you add the dynamic of Islam, radical Islam, and those same practices are still happening today. We saw on October 7th of 2023 babies burned in ovens, men, women, and children slaughtered, decapitated, burned alive, all those things that we as a civilized people find horrific and appalling are celebrated in the Islamic world. I sat during a seminar and heard the audio recording of the events that were going at the time. This was real time going on in Israel, in those kibbutz and the towns that were there. These Islamic radicals were going in, slaughtering Jewish people, picking up the cell phone of the person that they killed and calling mom and dad and saying, and this one particular audio, he said, I just killed 10 Jews. And mom and dad were celebrating with him, saying, oh, we're so proud of you, son. I mean, this, again, I can't wrap my mind around that kind of hatred and that kind of barbarism. Yet they were celebrating it with their son. Like you and I, if we had a child that went to medical school or law school and saying, congratulations, well done, we're so proud of you. They were celebrating the fact that their sons were killing Jews in this. And again, simply because they were Jews. Shalom. I'm Gary Cristofero, Vice President of Ezra International. Some of you have been calling in to Ezra International and asking, is the Aliyah still happening today? Well, I'm here to tell you, it's happening. Ezra International is helping over 500 Jewish people get home to Israel in each of the months since the war began in Israel. Listen, anti-Semitism is off the charts around the globe, and Jewish people are recognizing this, and they desire to go home, and we're there for them. we're going to help them get home to Israel regardless of the situation on the ground. But that too is in the hands of the Holy One of Israel. And Israel is still the safest place for a Jewish person. They desire to go home. We're here to help them make it home. God bless you. Thank you for helping. Go to EzraInternational.org today and give your best gift. Partner with God and help Jewish people get home. Not because they had done anything, to harm them. I mean, in fact, one story that I picked up on recently was there was a man, very, very liberal and wealthy Jewish man, who wanted to prove to the world, he wanted to prove to the right-wing world, the Jews and the right, that we can live side by side with our Arab brothers and sisters. A very liberal man, wanted to show that we can live in peace with our Arab neighbors. And in many cases, that is true in Israel proper. But when it comes to the Hamas and Hezbollah and Islamic Jihad, there's no chance of that. But why I bring him up is because he wanted to spend billions, with a B, wanted to raise the funds and spend billions of dollars building infrastructure in the south on the border with Gaza in order for Arabs to have jobs and build their way of life side by side with those who are living in south of Israel alongside the Gaza border. He was one of them among the first to be killed by these radicals who came across on October 7th. Here he was trying to prove to the world that you can have peace with this type of person, and they proved very quickly that it is impossible. It's impossible to make peace with the people who are subscribed to this ideology that all they want is you dead, and that's what the world doesn't understand.
Too many conversations have echoed to me from Holocaust survivors' mouths that they had no idea that their next door neighbors, who they'd been friends with for generations, would turn on them and drag them into the streets. And that's pretty much the same stories that I've heard. And I think you tell a story.
I do. I knew a gentleman who he escaped a labor camp. His name was Shlomo. He just bolted one day. He ran, and the guards didn't see him. And he's running through the woods. And fortunately for him, a woman stopped him, yelled. He said it was the first time he was used to the Germans yelling at him in anger. This woman was yelling at him, but it was to stop him, caution, warning, and told him the way to the border. And he said she told him, if you keep running this way, you're going to run into another labor camp. But if you go this way, you cross the river, you go across the border. He escaped. He lived in Israel for a while, and he said he made many Muslim friends. Somebody told him that they will turn on you if the time comes, and he didn't believe them. So he went to each of them. He said he went to 20 of his friends and said, "If it comes down to it, would you kill me?" And he said 18 of the 20 said, "Yes, we would kill you." They were honest. But he realized then and there that what Israel is up against and what the Jewish people are up against when it comes to radical Islam. And you mentioned the history of this. I just want to share one quick short passage. Exodus 17 verse 16 says, "Because the Lord has sworn, the Lord will have war with Amalek from generation to generation." Okay, for our audience sake, who was Amalek? Amalek was a guy who he and his hordes attacked Israel when they first came out of Egypt. Okay, we could say that the Egyptians maybe were anti-Semitic. They were afraid of Jewish people, of the Israelites growing too strong. But the first outside of Egypt, the first as a nation, because now Israel is a people, it's a nation. They're coming out of the Exodus as a people group. And Amalek attacks them. And we look at through history, Haman of Esther fame was a descendant of Amalek. I can't prove this, but I wouldn't doubt if Hitler was a descendant of Amalek. But the spirit remains. This idea of destroying a people because of who they are. And Amalek, according to the sages, was all about randomness. He wanted to prove that there was no God in control. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel, is a God of order, and the God of creation and the God of order. And he set things in motion, and he gave us his Torah to show how a people of God should behave. Amalek was about, no, it's all random. There is no God. It's all about chance and chaos. Exactly. That's why Haman drew lots. Instead of killing all the Jewish people when he had the opportunity, like instantly, he drew lots. Why? To show that it was just a random date that all the Jews are going to die. So Amalek represents the chaos and the evil in this world, and I believe what we're seeing through in the radical Islamists is the spirit of Amalek, and Jewish people will agree with that. Amalek, God said He would make war with them from generation to generation, until the Messiah returns. We are going to see this battle play out, and the enemies of Israel are focused on destroying the Jewish people. Why? Because they represent the God of creation.
So let me ask you then, with Amalek being a real person in a real world and real history, he doesn't live lifetimes, he lives once. So you're talking about, and I'll throw a phrase on it we talked off camera about, and that is the spirit of Amalek.
Right.
I don't like those terms because it's not fleshly enough for me. I'm simple-minded.
Well, bring some perspective.
Well, I would just say that it's illogical to think that there is a people group with no evidence. There's no evidence that they would try to rule the world, take over the world, that they try to harm their neighbors. What we see in real life, real truth, is that the only wars that have taken place with Israel are those where they're defending themselves against a rabid enemy.
That's right.
And so, the idea, even the Twin Towers coming down in America, many blamed on the Jewish people. It's well, how does that make any sense at all? There's no evidence at all. But it's jumping immediately to the Jew is in the wrong. That's what's illogical, and if you want to throw that spin back on it again, that's the spirit of Amalek. In other words, it's illogical. It makes no sense at all, yet, for all these generations, that has been the mindset.
Yeah.
How does that make sense?
I think that's the spiritual element of it that I think most referring to, and I'm referring to, is that it's satanic. It's demonic. It's, the moment Abraham cut the animals to make covenant with God, vultures came down and he had to shoo them away. I believe that represented all the demonic forces that have been at play ever since to try to thwart the plan of God. Because the Jewish people are a blessing to the world in so many ways, and not the least of which, obviously, is that they brought us our Messiah. They brought us the Word. They brought us, and they bring us so much wisdom. Look at the practical aspects of it, the medical research and just
technology.
It's endless, and yet
philosophy.
Yeah, but the enemy doesn't want them to exist. Why? Because they represent the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is the creator of the universe. He wants them gone, because they are a witness to the fact that, and in fact, I would love to talk more about this maybe in the next program. They are a witness to the world that God is real, God exists, God is faithful. And when I say God, I'm not talking generic God. I'm talking about the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He identified himself with 3 generations to make it very clear that he is not Allah. He is not any other pagan god that you can think of. He is the one, the creator of the universe, the one true God, and he is reaching out to the world. I believe Israel is like this banner, or there's he's shooting off flares saying, I'm real, I exist, look at me, look at my faithfulness, I'm showing you, and the world doesn't want to see it.
So you used an illustration from the life of Abraham, of God putting Abraham asleep. That's some of the details, and then God, splitting that animal and then walking through it. What was that event called? What was that event?
The covenant.
It was a covenant.
It was a covenant.
So, and then you showed, which was really wise. You showed these crows or these birds coming down. They're trying. So the idea is to stop the covenant from taking place, or to ruin the covenant, break the covenant, whatever, get rid of the covenant. Right. That's exactly what we've been seeing for all these years. And I was even going to the book of Revelation, you and I talked about off camera a little bit, Revelation chapter 12, verse 4, and it says, when it talks about the stars falling from heaven, the 30 of the angels, what many of us understand it. And it says, and the dragon stood before the woman, and we almost always translate that as Israel, the woman who was about to give birth to devour her son as soon as it was born. So it's this concept of Israel giving birth to Messiah, who would come and continue the covenant of God.
Right.
And here, all the way in Revelation, started back in Genesis, all the way to Revelation, we see this idea of thwarting or breaking or demolishing or ending the covenant with the Jewish people.
Right. Because if the enemy could succeed in that, he would prove that God is a liar and incapable of keeping his promise.
So let me say this one last thing. I know we're running out of time.
Sure.
So if that's the case, then how many of our leaders in the pulpits today have said the very same thing about the covenant with Israel being done, and now we're the new recipients?
Wow. Well, when you put it that way, it sounds like it's right from the pit of hell, doesn't it?
It does.
And I think, how many ministers, how many teachers have to repent of that lie if they're repeating that lie to a congregation?
Well, I'm not sure who should end this. Seems like you interviewed me more than me you. Why don't you go ahead and close off the program?
It was great. It was great because I wanted to hear your perspective, and you have some great insight on that. It was great experience that you have with the Jewish people.
Thank God.
But we are out of time, and I would hope that you would go to EzraInternational.org and look us up some more and see all about what we're doing to help Jewish people get home to Israel as soon as you can. God bless you. Thank you. We'll see you next time.
Interview. I'm Dr. Rik Watch. I'm here with a couple guests you're going to love. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Rik.
Gary Christopher from Ezra.